Hello, everyone, and welcome to the LeanTossup Call of Duty League podcast, Champs. This is the Champs preview. We have a very special guest here, but before we talk to him, I'll introduce my co-host, CDLMetrics. That's it. This is it. We've made it to the end of the Call of Duty League season. How does it feel?
Yeah, it's gone by, I feel like the fastest of any season we've had so far. And maybe by total number of days, it is the fastest. Like, we just got to June. Spoiler alert, we're recording this very early. It's June 2nd. So a few weeks yet before Champs actually is here. But we figured not much will change in the next few weeks. So we decided to knock this out early. But yeah, it's crazy. We're already here. It was a very entertaining season, a unique season in a few ways. And we'll touch on that in a couple slides from now. But yeah, excited to have on Doug here. We had him on a couple times last year, and we haven't had him on yet this year, but we figured now is a good time for it. But yeah, Doug, how are you doing?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me. I noticed when I went to pull up the Drive shared with me files, the last file I have shared with me was the podcast from last year at Champs. Because I clicked on that one and I'm like, this doesn't look right. But yeah, so it has literally been almost, less than a year because, this has been a really short season. Yeah, that was July 5th that we had this one last year, so a whole month later. So it has felt like a really fast season. It's been interesting. I will say, right away, like I have been missing the last month or so just with travel, and I had a bachelor party, and it feels like, I don't know, the season just vanished. Like I remember Major 3, I was super invested, and then I was out of town a couple weeks, and now it feels like the whole season is over already. I feel like they really stepped on the gas at the end of the season to get everything done with the 5-game final qualifier. I don't know. I think it'll be weird when the season ends, or I guess we have EWC still, but I think it'll be weird being done so early this year. But yeah, happy to be here, happy to be back, happy to get into everything that happened.
Yeah, it's been a while since we had you on the podcast, but this year it's gone by so fast. So, but yeah, happy to have you on. We'll talk about something involving you in just a second, but we'll just do a quick recap of last-ish week. This was Major 4. I went 1 for 3. Shout out to Thieves, sorry, not Surge, just getting absolutely killed there. And then Toronto Ultra also getting killed there as well. But CDLMetrics had a really good week there. He had Thieves and FaZe to reach the final, and both reached the final. So there you go. Solid week there for you, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't super exciting because it was the two favorites that made it, but I figured if two of these three could get through, it'd be okay for me. It's a small win, not anything crazy, but yeah, still a good major nonetheless. I very much enjoyed Major 4 just as a watcher. Yeah, hopefully Champs lives up to the hype too.
Yeah. And then the combined model plays for us on the week. Nothing much here. Didn't do so great on Monday, but FaZe was not a bad play there. Again, very difficult to do this through an entire major when only you have a few lines there on the beginning. Anyways, one of the reasons why we brought Doug here, the CDL points contest results. Just a quick reminder for anybody who's tuning in right now. For the first time, CDLMetrics began this contest at the beginning of the year. Everyone was able to submit entries into it, and just spoiler, it will be coming back next year. But these are the final results. Doug, you have won our contest. But congratulations, congratulations for winning. By the barest of margins, though, it was very competitive for all the top here for me, and obviously
when Toronto got eliminated, I thought I might not have it. But I think so. If FaZe had won the final, I would have lost, right? Yeah, it would have been. Because
no, I think you still would have beat me by 5 or 10 points. So yeah, it would have been really close. I think so. Going into Sunday, and this is my way of coping because I actually finished like 6th in the standings, but it was obviously super close between me and second place. So going into Sunday, it was FaZe versus Heretics in winners final, and Thieves versus Optic in that losers round semifinal, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. And the way I would have won, had I won, it would have had to been like, I couldn't have a Thieves over anyone in the final. I lose that because I did not have Thieves. But if it was FaZe over Thieves, I lose. So I needed like FaZe over Optic or FaZe over Miami or those flipped around where Optic over FaZe or Optic over Miami, any of those would have hit. But yeah, unfortunately, Thieves did their thing, which I was worried about going into Major 4. But yeah, nonetheless, super fun sweat to the end there. And congrats, yeah, to you, Doug. It was close if you think about it in terms of it was somewhat of a coin flip going into the last day, but you cleared everybody by 50 points, which is a pretty big gap when you look down the leaderboard there.
And
congrats to you, but yeah.
As the only person in like the top 10 to pick Carolina, it was certainly, I felt really strong and then just got weaker and weaker as the season went on. I felt like after the first major, I think, yeah, because Miami did well at the first major, and I felt like I was going to have the best team or whatever. And then, yeah, because Carolina looked really strong, Miami looked really strong. Like, I had faith in Toronto, and 100T was obviously already looking really strong. But yeah, I felt like I was losing my grip on the game if we added points for champs, I think the standings might look a little different, because I feel a bit more bullish on Vancouver than I do on Carolina at this point, and like they're already, yeah. So I think I just got lucky that the season ended when it did. I'm glad they decided to accelerate the season a little bit this year to help save my chances at winning. But
yeah, it's really interesting in that case. I will say that there's very clearly like a line here between the top, again, between second and sixth is 5 points. It's such a small difference there. But then obviously a massive gap there. And I think we'll go around and we'll explain our kind of team building strategies here and what we try to do. So I'll go first in that. Mine's kind of pretty obvious. Basically, based on how we've seen the last couple of years in the CDL go, we've seen very top heavy, usually 1 to 2 top teams, and then grouping of smaller other teams that are competitive but not necessarily at the top. And to be fair, that's exactly what we saw this year too. But based off of that read, I said, who are the best 2 teams on paper, and then what's the next best team that I think it is? And I went in that case for Thieves because they've been the most consistent. They've won the league every year, except for this league in terms of points, right? Not in terms of CDL Champs, but in terms of points, FaZe have won every year. Which, again, it not necessarily means that they're the best team, but it means they rack up the wins in the regular season, which, to be fair, that's all this contest is for. And that, I also thought Thieves were the best team on paper, and then outside of that, I didn't think Ultra was the next best team. I thought Surge was, so I went with Surge, and I didn't have enough money for anything else. I was like, I think $1 or $2 short of Falcons, but I preferred Surge over Miami, and that's why I went with that. So that was my call. Doug, what was your call on this?
yeah, so I'll admit that I didn't put not a ton of thought, because I actually did put a fair bit of thought, but not into like how I thought the teams were going to play. I think my read at the beginning was I don't really know how I think there's a lot of randomness throughout the season, and like I don't really know how teams are going to play. So my initial strategy was I took the standings from last season and I adjusted them slightly because I did think that Vegas was going to be way worse than the worst team from last year. And then I just assigned the dollar values from the teams this year to the teams that finished in the order that they finished last year, and then just optimize. Like I just did a knapsack problem optimization to figure out what the best team I could have had was out of those like dollar values, and then I just played around with the value a little bit to try to like come more in line with my take on who were the better teams. So I think if I remember correctly, the only like big changes are, hold on, I need to pull up what the prices were, but because there was, what was it? Yeah, Vancouver and Carolina were at the same price, which was like a big sort of distinction for me. Obviously, I went with Carolina. I thought Carolina was going to be stronger than Vancouver. I was pretty low on Hixie joining the team at the beginning of the year, which ended up being like what happened, but I was pretty low on Hixie, so I wanted Carolina over Vancouver at the same price. And then I was very low on Cloud9. Like I thought Cloud9 was going to be really bad this year, which ended up being right. Congrats to me for being omniscient. But yeah, just didn't see it. I didn't think bringing Mac back was a good idea at all, and I was like never going to touch them. If you certainly look at this thing, you can see one common theme, which is that if you played Cloud9, you really got smashed, because yeah, they were $9, I think. Yeah, $9 and didn't really do anything, and that was about it. I really did debate doing the Vegas Falcons thing. Like I was in the boat that I thought they were going to be terrible, though. I thought they would get 0 points the whole season, and they probably would have if they hadn't switched up the strategy, and who could have seen that coming. But that was why I started with the optimization, not with the predictions of how I thought the teams would do, because who knows when teams are going to do stuff. But yeah, that was my general strategy, was like just apply last year's distribution of points to this year's teams by their point total, by their dollar totals, and just this is just what was optimal. Because I shared Robert's thought that like if I had built this without that, I would have picked Atlanta. Like, they're literally the regular season Reapers. Like, it just seems stupid not to play them. But yeah, it was like they just didn't finish quite high enough last year to have made it worth it at the price they were at. Brian, how about you?
Yeah. So I love hearing you guys' like explanation for how you got to these teams, and it does make a lot of sense. Doug, I will say that your methods of assigning a value to each team sounds a lot like what I did to put a price on each of these teams. So it makes sense that you would maybe win this contest because you read my mind on a lot of this stuff. But still, you built a completely different team than I did. Maybe not. But so I'll spill the beans on how I price the teams. And it's probably not a huge surprise. But before the season started, like, we had odds on each team's likelihood to win champs. That was a separate market. And we had an idea of, FaZe and Thieves and Optic and all those elite teams they have very good odds to win champs. And then you go down the board and Vegas Falcons have a 0% chance to win champs. There was also a market for odds to be the regular season number 1 seed. And interestingly enough, that market didn't align perfectly with the champs winner market. Like, I think in one of the markets, FaZe was the overall favorite, and in the other market, Thieves was the favorite. I want to say Thieves was the favorite to win champs. FaZe was the favorite to be the 1 seed, which, I mean, now both of those can't happen because we know that Thieves are the overall 1 seed, but I think I went off of the odds to be the 1 seed market because I thought that was more indicative of, this is what the market thinks, like, the season as a whole will be. Like, champs is a different story. That's half a year away. Let's look at the regular season market. So I looked at that, and then I looked at how the CDL points were distributed for every given season that we've had the CDL. We've always had 12 teams.
It was exactly like what I was doing.
Yeah, we've always had 12 teams. Yeah. So the distribution has never been like weird in that there was a season with 10 teams or 14 teams or whatever. We've always had 12. The total points has always been different. We've had longer seasons. We've had shorter seasons. This is the first season where we've had minor tournaments. That throws some extra CDL points into the mix. We've had years where majors are worth fewer points than they are now. So I tried to weight all of that evenly and just say, generally speaking, the team that ends first in the CDL season accrues, like 10 or 12% or 14% or whatever of all of the CDL points on the season. The last place team is generally around like 3 to 4 to 5% of the total CDL points that get distributed out. So I just went off of that scale and tried to match teams to prices that way. Yeah, it sounds a lot like what you did, Doug. But anyway, my team, I figured I wanted 4. I think that was a question a lot of people had to ask themselves, was how many teams do you want? And what teams from what tier do you want? And I know a big thing, I don't play like any DFS style fantasy content, but I know that being unique and like being on players or teams that are under-owned relative to market is a very easy way to get leverage. So my initial thought was, so the top tier of teams was FaZe at $14, Optic at $13, and Thieves at $12. That was the top 3, and most teams had at least one of those teams picked. In fact, all of the teams except for the last place team had one of those teams picked. So my thinking was, I'm going to take the expensive team because I think Thieves will be the most popular team. And I think they might have been, or it was probably pretty close. I'm just trying to do the quick math of who all was picked from that table. But my thinking was like, I'll pay the extra $2 to get the team that's always finished in first every CDL season, and then hope that the people who all try to save $2 to pick Thieves are wrong. Obviously, that didn't work out. That was part of the reason why I didn't win. But that was the thinking. And then I figured I wanted 3 other teams, like what you said, Doug. I viewed this season as I know there's one team that's going to be really bad. After that, I really don't know. I think it's pretty wide open. So I decided to take a couple cheap teams. Boston Breach and Miami Heretics were both just $5. Let me double check that. Yes, they were both $5. Yep. And I thought, hey, these teams aren't bad. I looked at the lineups. I looked at the CDL coaches poll. People were really high on Miami, which early in the season didn't really make sense to me, but it's like now we see it with them. So I was like, let's just take both of those teams. They're both pretty cheap. And then with the money I had left, I took Toronto because I don't know, they could win a major. That wouldn't surprise me at all. They've been a good organization year in and year out. That's how I got to the 4 teams. I really wanted to avoid Vegas. I figured some teams would fall for that bait of like, how can I squeeze them into my lineup? But yeah, I had the thought of if I have the $3 of budget, it's probably wiser to spend up on a team that I can go get rather than tack on a Vegas Falcons. So if Vegas Falcons had made their lineup switch earlier in the year, I think it could be a totally different story. And actually, you can see the 4 teams that took Falcons are all pretty evenly distributed throughout the lineup. The person on the bottom took them, but there's one in the middle there. Johnny Warren took them, and then a couple people near the top also took Vegas Falcons. So it wasn't the worst pick in the world, but just they were an interesting sort of wrinkle to add to this because everyone knew they would be bad, but could they earn you enough points to make the $3 worth it?
Yeah.
But yeah, just fascinating. Yeah, like Robert said, it'll be back next year, and hopefully I will win.
I wanted to give you some credit for, I think, to me the format felt really good. I feel like, especially the dynamics, like there were a couple spots where, what was it, Miami, Boston, Vancouver, Carolina, where you had to make a choice, like they're the same price. I thought that added a little fun to it, but also not having everyone grouped at the same prices gives you there were obviously lots of ways to make the teams. I like your thought process. I think it's interesting, like just looking at the leaderboard here, like to me playing 4 teams felt like a no-brainer. Like I just wanted more cracks at it. Like I just knew that I didn't know what was going to happen and I wanted more cracks, but like you look at like Robert's team, he almost wins because he's a better predictor of what was going to happen. Like he had the choice between Carolina and Vancouver and chose Vancouver, and like, if he had chosen Carolina you would have gotten smoked, but that was your edge. But I don't know, looking at it I still feel like I want to play 4 next year too. But I don't know, this is all to say like props to you because I think the pricing was pretty solid. I will say, why was Texas more than 100T was? That was like, I think because that was what made it a little. You'll notice the one big difference is the teams that were the worst chose Optic just because the price didn't really feel right. Other than that, I thought the pricing was like perfect. Like I thought it was like right on.
Yeah, that was. I remember thinking there were a couple points when I was making the pricing where I really had to wrestle with, do I price this team over this team or the other way around? If I remember correctly, and I guess I could look back on our slides from Major 1 Week 1 and see what I did, but I believe that the odds to be the 1 seed at the end of the season, Optic must have been priced above Thieves. I would guess that Thieves had better Champs odds, or I can't remember if I aggregated those to break ties, and for whatever reason, Optic came out just ahead of Thieves in that regard. And I figured Optic would be a popular pick too, and I didn't bake that into the pricing at all. That was more of a, I don't want to pick Optic because I figure they'll be picked,
Optic
and I
was
want
11,
the other 2 teams.
Like I think every single person probably would have picked them. You're not going to get it all perfect anyway. I think this ended up being great. Honestly, looking at the ownerships, I feel like, it was spot on. Yeah, it was a severe amount of LAT in Atlanta, but that's what you expect. I think the game was really, okay, then who's going to be the 5th best team? Who's going to be the 7th best team? Like that, that's what it came down to. I think that was that made it fun.
One point I just kind of want to make on that, because we mentioned Vegas a little bit in here, and I think the reason I wanted, because I know we mentioned that a lot of people were trying to squeeze Vegas in there, and some people decided not to do that. The reason I wanted to squeeze Vegas in there wasn't because I thought they were going to get a lot of points. The reason was because of the team change. Because if there's a team that is so bad, especially a team that's backed by oil money, they're likely to make changes pretty quickly, and that's the thing. So I think now, I fully expected them to make a change at some point. I just didn't expect them to I thought it'd be a bit more impactful, But to be fair, they pulled off some stuff from what was left. Like they grabbed Pred, they grabbed Priesta, they grabbed RCDs. Like they just grabbed what they could. They didn't really make any big plays for any major pieces. I think that'll change for next year. But the thing is, I think part of the $3 price was definitely not really pricing in that potential of the mid-season adjustment to their roster. And I think that's why I gravitated. But then for my numbers, though, for what I had, I couldn't afford. I was like, I think $1 or $2 short, right, for Vegas, so I couldn't do it. But that was like one of the options. I think LAG was also a potential option for that too, but at a $9 price point, it wasn't really worth it. So that's the thing. I think there maybe needs to be some like, and again, to be fair, Vancouver had a team change. Miami had a team change, right? These are, and even Optic did too. The thing is, I think these prices, I think they actually were fine, right? It forced you to make a lot of really hard decisions, but I think that there also needs to be consideration that if a team is good but underperforms, they could be 1 or 2 roster changes away from being very competitive. So I think that was one of the reasons why when Vancouver was underperforming, I wasn't as concerned, because once they made a team change, they got Neptune in there, they were amazing. So I think the possibility of team changes, especially in something like this, has to be really heavily considered.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's basically if you're middle of the table, if you're predicting at the beginning of the season they're middle of the table, then the odds that they can get a one-man swap and become the best team in the league, you're probably not having to pay enough of a premium for that. Versus, like a team like Vegas, coming into the season, they have 4 guys that are probably not going to do anything. They basically have to do what they did, which is swap everyone out. And what are the odds that they hit gold 3 times in a row? Or what? And honestly, getting Pred is like crazy that they were able to get a player of that caliber as it is. That was like pretty serendipitous for them as it was. I do think, like, I just want to make one claim, which is that obviously Optic didn't do as well as people expected this year, but I certainly wasn't. I didn't have that read coming in. I think that's why I was jabbing about the prices a little, is because I think it would have exposed people like me who, I was fine with that. Like, I thought they were going to be pretty good. I didn't think they were going to be as good as 100T. And so I think if they were 11 or whatever, like, I definitely would have played them. I had no inside knowledge that they were going to come out so poor. Like, they just looked really bad. And I think it would have been funny, like, mid-season to see all the teams holding Optic bags being like, oh man, I wished I'd picked Miami or whatever.
Yeah, I'll let Ryan come in on one point, but what I do want to say, though, is that Optic being bad very much changed the calculus here, right? Because in past years, we've had a lot of clumping in the top 4, but by Optic not taking those points, it gave it to those middle-tier teams. It allowed Vancouver, Miami, and Toronto, and even to a lesser extent Carolina, it allowed them to accumulate all these points. If those had been going Optic and this dollar figure had been a lot more, like the average here was a lot higher, there would have been a lot less value on those middle tier teams, right? Based on the construct of the game. So Optic not being that way really made those middle value picks so much more valuable.
Yeah. So I just want to touch on what we're seeing here. This is just a quick data viz thing I put together to showcase the value that each team gave you if you selected them. So if you see, they're in order of total CDL points, 1 through 12. Thieves are number 1, Vegas are number 12. And then the dot that you see associated with the team color is just the total points they gave you per dollar that they cost. So the first dot that jumps off the page almost literally is Miami. They were the second cheapest team on the board. They were tied with Boston at only $5, so they were very affordable. And if you're projected to be the 11th team in the league and you actually finish 5th, it's like a huge deal. And like they weren't that far off from even the 4th place team. Like they're closer to Vancouver than they are Carolina, which is crazy. So their midseason turnaround was amazing. And if you had Miami on your team, you were in a good spot. Other ones that really jump off. So Surge were number 2. Thieves were very close to them as well in terms of just how much value they gave you. I do think it's interesting to talk about Surge and Ravens in tandem, not just because you two each picked one of those and it almost cost Doug, but not really. But just that, like you guys mentioned lineup changes and how they could be a boost. And I agree, like you could justify taking a really cheap team. And Miami are that team. Like the reason they're 60 points per dollar in a lot of ways is because Super came onto the team and all of a sudden they're the best search team in the game. Their hard point looks a little better. Their control looks a little better. And now they're competing at majors. They didn't win any and they didn't even reach the final in any tournament we had this year, but they were highly competitive and were a consistent force in the league for the last 2 to 3 months of the season. So like that lineup change worked. others that happen get lost in the shuffle, I feel like, at times. Like, Ravens are a team that early in the season, Ravens were the best search team in the game, I think, by a lot of measures, and were in that sort of discussion as like maybe they're not FaZe or Thieves, but they're pretty good. Like, I wanted them up by Ultra as that like next contender tier, and they showed up to Major 2, I think it was, and Vivid had a black eye or something, and he could only use one of his eyes or whatever, and they still finished like third or fourth at that major, and it was awesome to see. And then they do the thing where they get rid of Vivid in place of Rex, and we're all, okay, this could work. I guess you want to be a better hardpoint team or a better control team, and maybe you think your search will still be as good. And like Carolina, after that roster change, we'll talk about them a little later too, they have been like unequivocally bad since then, and I'm curious to see if they make any changes before Champs. I don't think they will, but just a weird sort of lineup change that can go the complete opposite way. Obviously, we know Optic made a bunch of roster shuffles throughout the year. And yeah, those $9 teams that are way at the bottom of the table, Cloud9 and LAG, for a lot of people, they viewed those teams as not locks to make champs, but like very likely to make champs, rosters that looked like they could compete with the best teams in the league, and it just went sideways really fast. So I think it just goes to show that like every season, like we have a pretty good understanding of the best teams and the worst teams in the league, and the middle is just really tough to iron out, I feel like, most seasons. And I think this past season was a great example of that. But yeah, I don't know. Any last statements from you guys? Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I'm curious both of your thoughts on. To me, it felt like this season the like mid-season substitution was more important than it's been in the past, or like more impactful. Like obviously, I do think like that those players can make a difference, but it felt like this season either more of them and also more impactful. Like I think we saw. I mean, we had a fair bit of like not failures, but yeah, like players like Rex came up and like it didn't make a huge bit of difference or whatever. But yeah, like Super is a great example. Nep coming back in and suddenly making the team look amazing was a good example. Mercules is another great example of someone who came in and like instantly made a big change and changed a team's chances at making champs or like doing well at champs. I feel like we get one of those every year. Or I don't know. Am I misremembering? But it feels like to me this year has been like a year where it literally felt like you could reach into the bag and pull out a player mid-season that was going to change the whole trajectory of your season in a way that we haven't seen in the past. Like even with Falcons, like they didn't do anything, but they went from a team that was going to be a 0-win team to a team that had 35 points, and like they did it mid-season. I don't know, like to me, I feel like teams in the past have been pretty hard pressed to like just pull 35 points out of the bag mid-season if they're not like that they're not going to get otherwise. Like they're just I don't know. It doesn't maybe one person each year. But yeah, curious your guys' thoughts on that, if this was like the season of the mid-season pickup being the difference maker.
Yeah, I do think sorry, Robert, if I could just
go ahead.
I think you're right in that. And I think it has to do more with like the game that is being played. Like this game, to me at least, feels like there's a higher skill gap on. And I think that's a reason why only 2 teams out of these 12 won an event this year, and that's another thing we'll touch on in a slide or two. I don't know, these Treyarch games just they're really fun to watch, I'll be honest. Like, I love watching the CDL this season. Even though there's only 2 teams in the league that are good, or that are very good, it's very easy to see the skill gap, I think, and that just stretches these points out in a huge way, and it makes one person that much more important. Where I'm thinking of what's been maybe the least skill gap involved CDL game that we've had, I want to say Vanguard, and that at times felt like just pure chaos. Maybe your roster change made a difference, but probably not, because it's just chaos. Every map is insane. You break walls. There's no trophy systems. Just throw bombs everywhere. It was just like, what is going on? The map pool was also weird. Like, we only played 2 controls for 3/4 of the season. So there's games like that where I think the lineup changes only do so much. But in a game like this, or maybe if we go back to Cold War, I'd have to look at like the mid-season lineup changes for that. But I would guess that they felt somewhat similar to this, in that like you bring on a challengers guy who hasn't played yet, and maybe he can give you that boost that you really need. So I don't know, Robert, any thoughts?
Yeah, I will say that this year definitely seems like there's a much higher skill gap. How many times have we seen just the last 2 years get near the end of the game, and then all we do that they're cutting between the cameras of all the players, especially in a hard point, and they're all just holding corners, and you're like, okay, the game's over. And obviously, people are still holding corners and points, but it's a lot more vivid. It's a lot less, oh, okay, this is just over. Because it's not, oh, you have to beat this first guy, then you have to beat the second. It's just, okay, no, there's like, these points are alive, right? There's chances where you could beat a couple of guys straight through to a point. Not just, okay, you lose the first one and then you lose to the second one. It's a lot more contested. And I think by doing that, you basically there's a lot more in terms of that in terms of roles, right? In terms of, okay, this guy goes in there, breaks the point. This guy's the more just roaming slayer. Like there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more skill involved and a lot more importance on individual roles on a team, especially in hard point. This has probably been one of the better hard point games I think for a long time. Hard point is just so good this year. Every time you see a hard point, you just want to watch the hard point. You want to watch it, and I think that when you get to a game like that, one single team change, one role change on the team, that could have a massive impact on it. I think that's why we saw such success there with the team changes for Vancouver and Miami.
Agree.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I do tend to think that we're probably like because the season is like top of mind. I would have to go back and look at the other seasons to make sure. But yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree on the points about how the skill gap this season has seemed higher or like wider. No, it's interesting because like I think like for teams going into this off season or whatever, deciding like how much stock you want to put into like building the best team to start versus like making the team as you go, that calculus changes a little bit for me if I'm building a team going into next year compared to how I felt going into last year. Because like typically in the past, I've always felt like the pickings are always going to be slim in the mid-season to try to find someone who's really going to elevate your game, or you're going to dip into the more of an unknown challengers player that could be really good or not. But it's always felt like you want to establish a solid base where you're one guy or like just a slight upgrade away from being good. But this year it felt like I don't know. Yeah, like you saw multiple teams making like you saw LEG trying a bunch of players. You saw Vegas trying a bunch of players. Like teams were willing. Even Miami, how many different starting? They had multiple starting lineups, right? Or like multiple starting lineups before they landed on the one that worked. So yeah, I don't know. It feels like maybe if I'm going into the off season this year, I'm thinking, I'll put together a team that I think can win, but yeah, I'm going to be looking for that next opportunity, that next player to come up. There is a legitimate chance that the best challenger player at the beginning of the season is like better than 70% of the CDL right now at like hard point or something. If the game it has the same skill gap and the same like really live hard point that we had this year, who knows? I'm not super privy. I haven't been keeping up on like the intel for next season, so I'm not really sure what the game will be like, but yeah, interesting.
Moving on to league news. This was obviously the bracket from the major that we saw. Thieves obviously won at 4-2. Thieves went on a rampage. They beat Surge 3-0. Then they lost to Heretics in a game 5. Then they got dropped down to the lower bracket and just crushed everyone, including Heretics, back on the losers bracket to do that. Interesting results. Surge got dropped 0-2, losing to Thieves in obviously round 1, and then losing 3-2 to Falcons, who then lost 3-2 to Minnesota. Obviously, Optic went a little further than expected, maybe. They went up, they beat Ultra round 1. They lost to FaZe. They came down here and something like that. Any other real comments about this? Because this major kind of went mostly as expected, with the exception, obviously, of Miami. Any other kind of comments on this? I'll go to Doug first, and then we'll go to Ryan.
No, yeah, it's a tough draw for Optic to have their 2 losses come to Atlanta and LAT, but I do think it's like an interesting from how Champs is going to play out perspective. Like I'm of the opinion of that I'm this way for other sports as well, but that like the regular season shows like who the best team is or whatever, like it's the most games but like to win Champs is like the only thing that really matters to most of these teams or whatever. And like to me, to see Optic like in the best state that we've seen them in a while, but not be super competitive against FaZe or 100T or not be able to win either of those makes me think that they're probably like maybe like a top 4 team, but probably not going into chance. I don't know. Like to me, this was like the chance for them to say, okay, yeah, we beat Ultra, like we're gonna be something serious. And yeah, I don't know. I just wasn't like super impressed. But otherwise, yeah, it played the way that everyone thought it would. Yeah, the Vegas Falcons upset is obviously a bit surprising, but other than that, yeah, it was just like, okay, yeah, it sucks for Optic that they have to play the two best teams and get knocked out, but they secure their champs bid, and like they did lose to both of those teams that they're going to have to probably play. They have to play one of them, but they're going to probably need to play both of them to win champs. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Major 4, it was pretty chalky. Like, it was probably the chalkiest major we've had all season. I remember Major 1 also ended with FaZe versus Thieves in the final. I think that was FaZe 4-3 win over Thieves. I can't remember how we got there, if it was as chalky as this was, because, like, you look at winners bracket round 2, that is the 1, 4, 2, and 3 seeds all lined up to play each other, and then the 1 and the 2 seed are playing each other in the winners finals. So in terms of seeding, that was expected. I guess you'd say Thieves were favored over Heretics for sure in that spot, but to see a Heretics 3-2 win isn't shocking. And then it's, oh yeah, we get that same matchup 2 rounds later, and what do you know, Thieves got their revenge anyway. So we had some crazy stuff that happened, I guess, in losers round 1. That was fun to watch, but largely inconsequential. Like, Surge probably was the biggest surprise out of anything on the weekend. Going out top 12 is pretty disappointing, but it's not something I want to, like, overreact to, because, like, your round 1 game was Thieves, and we've seen them play Thieves over and over again, and, like, they largely get slammed every time. They've had a couple series that have been fun and interesting and close, but it's Thieves, and Thieves are just like a steamroller right now. I don't want to hurt them too much for that performance, but yeah, like, losing to Falcons in any way is not pretty, but like we know, this Falcons team late in the season wasn't the same that was there early in the season, and losing in a Game 5, it can be a little up in the air, but yeah, you don't want to put yourself in that position where you might get a Game 5 loss to Falcons. Expect Surge to bounce back. I'm not too worried about them going into champs. Optic was interesting. You make a good point that, like, yeah, you played FaZe and Thieves and lost 3-1 both times, but you beat Toronto and you beat Minnesota easily, and I think we expected those to play out that way. I guess Optic versus Ultra was maybe more of a toss-up, so I don't know. If you're an Optic fan, it's good to see them come out on top in that spot, but they were the 3 seed, I think, and they get a 4th place finish. I think they're in a pretty healthy spot going into champs. I'd say they're probably, like, the best 7 seed we've ever had at a champs, at least in the CDL history, so I think that makes for an interesting storyline. We know Miami is hot right now. They'll make a fun 5 seed, I think they are. Yeah, one other thing I want to point out, and then we can start talking about champs games, actually, but the big, like, who is going to get the 8 seed thing played out pretty quickly, but then it got interesting again, because it was always like, can Optic hold the 8 seed for champs, or can Rocker jump them? Or I guess Cloud9 was also in that discussion, but we thought that they were a little fake anyway, and they got 3-0'd by LAG, so they were. But yeah, the fact that Optic win in round 1 and Rocker lose in round 1, it was like, okay, this might be over by Friday night sort of a thing. But then Rocker went on a nice little run through losers bracket, Optic fall down, and they play each other in round 3, and it was very much like I don't know, like, I got a little nervous for Optic fans just seeing that they met in losers round 3, because it's okay, if Rocker beat you guys, they only need, was it like 2 more wins? Like, it wasn't impossible for them to get it done. Thankfully, Optic handled business, and it was over after that. But it made for an interesting sort of storyline, even though the CDL points table looks like the 8 versus 9 seed wasn't even close. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So it's a 2-team league. I think this is pretty self-explanatory for what it is. So, Major 1, this is Major 1 last year?
So this is just
minor,
this season's results.
Minor 1. Oh, okay, yeah. These are minor, sorry. I misread that. So, yeah, basically, a couple of teams break in here. In Minor 1, Carolina got there. But, again, to be fair, these are single elimination. So, one match can basically bring you in or not. With the exception of Carolina here, everything else was either FaZe or Surge. And I think that alone is a huge FaZe or Surge or Thieves, right? It's basically those 3 teams, and even then, with the exception of, I think, this one? Or no, didn't they got destroyed in all these? Like they lost them both. What, 4-1 and 4-0?
Yeah, I got to look back and check those results specifically. But yeah, so I put this slide together just to show this, and I went back on previous seasons to see if this had ever happened before, and it hasn't, where two teams get all of the tournament wins for the season, that being FaZe and Thieves. They split them 3-3, and two teams, FaZe and Thieves, were represented, at least one of them, in every tournament we had this year. That had not happened before in any season prior, where just if we were in some sort of tournament final, we knew at least one of the teams was FaZe or Thieves. Like, we've had seasons where, like, FaZe, Thieves, Subliners, Optic, they're all in it, or I'm blanking on it, but Dallas Empire way back in the day, Rocker made a final. It's just crazy that we've had, like, we can show up to any tournament, minor or major, and, like, just pencil in one of the red teams. They'll be there. Maybe both of them will be there. That happened a couple times. So I think it just goes to show that, like, those teams obviously were built very well. FaZe have been a force every year. Thieves have been a force pretty much every year they've been in the CDL. But they were just built to last, and they just dominated this season, unlike anything we've seen before. Yeah, Surge went on a nice run midway through the season, but ultimately couldn't get over the hump. I'm not saying Surge can't win, or Heretics or Optic, whoever can't win, but it just is impressive that these two teams really dominated the league like we haven't seen yet before. So I don't know if you guys had any other thoughts on that, but just something to note.
Yeah, both Major 2 and Major 3 were 4-0s against Vancouver. So it was 4-3 Thieves at Minor 2. So a little bit of they put up more of a fight in that one. But yeah, they were both 4-0s at the Major for Vancouver, which is tough. Yeah, I don't know. It goes back to my point about Optic against these teams now. I don't know and I think we can go through more of the stuff that you guys have, and maybe we can pose this question at the end. But I do think if you're Vancouver here or you're Miami here, and you don't touch either FaZe or 100T at Champs, like, how are you feeling about this season? If you're, like, I think especially with Vancouver, you make the finals at 2 and 3, and then you go out double loss, head home on whatever it was, head home on Friday, and then you don't come top 2 at Champs. How successful did you feel like your season was? Yeah, do you stay the course, like, when you're still this far away from the top? Or, yeah, I don't know. Maybe we can just ponder for now, and then we can talk about it later at the end when we're talking about, going forward. But yeah, let's talk about Champs a little bit.
Yeah, so moving on to Champs, here is the Champs bracket here. Thieves Breach round 1, Surge, Heretics for the second match, FaZe Optic, and then Ultra Ravens. Again, we've seen these matches these are not really strangers to these. We've seen a lot of these matches again and again. So yeah, and then there's their bracket right there. Again, a much more simplified bracket than before. No losers bracket initially, just that's the way it goes. And let's dive in here with the match previews. So match 1, I think it is actually the first match that will happen, is Boston versus Thieves. Thieves, a cool minus 2,000 on the money line. Boston plus 750. Thieves minus 2.5, minus 125. Boston plus 2.5, minus 110. 52.5 point favorites in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the search, and no spread in the control because they are minus 2,000 in the control as well. Yeah, so you can see here, when I crunched this, I have Breach with, I think, a 1% chance of winning this. It's actually comical. I think it's like 99.3% chance for Thieves according to my model. It's actually, like, when I saw it, like, this is just like a comical number. Weirdly enough, only some slight value on Thieves minus 2.5, and because it likes Boston a little bit in map 1, but definitely not in map 2, and a little bit in map 3. But yeah, no, this seems pretty. I think we know what's going to happen here. Let's start changing up some orders a bit. Let's go Ryan, and then we'll go Doug after that.
Yeah. So put the order in for these matches, but I just checked the CDL website, and we don't have a schedule yet that's officially posted, so I just left them in the order of the bracket. There is a good chance that this will be the first match, though, because it's probably the worst one we have in round 1. I've been the Boston Breach guy for most of the year, but come on now. We've seen them pair up with Thieves a handful of times. It hasn't been pretty. Although they maybe have won once against Thieves. I've got to go back and check. I remember there was a weekend where they played Thieves and FaZe, and they split the series. and I was so happy for them. But nonetheless, yeah, they're gigantic underdogs. I've got them at 8% to win this series. Funny enough, I do have a little bit of value on them in the hard points, just because they're like enormously priced. Yeah, the market thinks they've got a 20% shot. I think they've got a 25% shot. So I don't know, maybe you want to play that and think that they can force a game 4 that way, but yeah, control is almost certainly out of the question. This is the best control team versus one of the worst control teams. Not the worst, but they're not great. Can Breach win a hard point or a search? Yes. Can they string together 3 wins in 5 games? Very likely not. So I do want to give a lot of respect to Breach. I think they were a solid team all year. I think they're deserving of this 8 seed at Champs. They're actually, fun fact, one of 3 teams to not make any roster move all season. So props to them for sticking it out. I am a big proponent of continuity matters in like any sport. So the fact that they took their Esports World Cup team from last summer that had some success, rolled it back, and for the most part, like Breach were a solid team all season. They had their ups and downs, but ultimately, like, you get an 8 seed, you get into Champs. I think that alone is a success. If they can get top 6 or better here, even better. I don't know if they will, but especially because they play Thieves here. But yeah, I don't know. It wouldn't shock me if Breach could force the game 4. Maybe you can take the hard point spread. I know that's a huge number if you don't want to take the money line, but yeah, this screams of a Thieves win. And honestly, if they don't win, we might be in for a really spicy champ. Yeah, it's going to be all Thieves here.
I think I obviously agree. I'm not going to make a hot take and think that Boston's winning this series. But yeah, I do. Yeah, I don't know. I'm always skeptical. I think anything can happen at Champ. Like, I'm of the mind that anything can happen at Champs. And I'm always skeptical when I see like single-digit chances for teams to win in the CDL. I still feel, and maybe I'm just like, it's too old school. And yeah, like I've definitely watched the least COD this year of any year, which is still way more than the average human should consume or whatever. But I don't know, like, COD is so random. Like, a search is so random. Like, there is a chance for these teams to get back in these games, and when they do, like, players are mentally unable to handle those sorts of like stressors still. I think it's gotten a lot better. I think like teams have invested in that, and like players have obviously matured a little bit as the seasons have gone on. But I think the reality is that if Boston comes out and takes map 1, like, I'm not counting anything out in this series. I have them slightly higher to win, but still like pretty marginal. But I don't know. I'm always a bit skeptical when I see, oh, Boston's got a 3% chance to win or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. Like I put that sounds like those are like Vegas Falcons numbers. I get that, and yeah, LAT might be like the best team that we've seen in a really long time, and I do have them significantly stronger than FaZe is even. But I don't know. Not that I'm saying I would bet anything here, but I'm just saying I feel for Boston a little bit to be like, yeah, getting Vegas Falcons numbers against a team when you like proved yourself and stayed the course the whole year. Like, I'd be insulted. But yeah, I also agree with Ryan. Like, if I was spying this game, I do think that the hard point. Yeah, I think Boston. I was looking at like how my mode level like elo has tracked for them over the season. Like, I think they're pretty average at hardpoint by the end of the year. They had their ups and downs for sure, but I'd say they were pretty average. It's just tough because 100T has just looked like an unstoppable force in hardpoint. But
yeah. Next up, match number 2, we guess. Miami versus Vancouver, -120 both ways. So they're basically saying this could go either way. Miami, -1.5, +162. Surge, +1.5, -225. Miami is the underdog in the hard point. Surge, 17.5 point favorites in the hard point. 1.5 round underdogs in the search, and then 1.5 round underdogs in the control. But that's shaded to -200 is basically dead even in the control. My model loves Miami here. Like, not even particularly close. I love Miami. I like Miami -1.5. I really like Miami in the hard point. I've got Miami very close to 50% in the hard point. And I love Miami in the search. I love Miami in the control. Ryan's numbers are a little more closer to market. Doesn't really love Surge, but definitely hates Surge less than I do. Doug, what are your thoughts on this one? Do you agree, whose model do you agree with? Pick a side here.
I would pick my favorite child. No, I'm definitely Man, yeah, I don't know. I think I got to go with Ryan. I think Miami are stronger for sure. I don't think they're 80% stronger, but I think they are a fair bit stronger than Vancouver is. Yeah, and obviously coming out of Major 4, like looking the way that Vancouver did, it's tough to like feel really good about them. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not as I think one of you alluded to before, like I'm not like super reading into Vancouver like bowing out of Major 4 like that. Yeah, it's tough to play Thieves on day one, and and you're playing in a game against Falcons where like you don't have a ton to play for. Yeah, I'm probably between the two. I think probably I'd have Miami closer to 60%, but yeah, I'm not touching 80. Ryan, what about you?
Yeah. So this is a tricky one. I do want to point out, if you look on the top line where our names are, I have put a little asterisk next to CDLMetrics. So this is something I don't do much, but I have tweaked my model just for champs. So here's what I did. I took each team and I filtered out matches where I literally couldn't care less how they performed because maybe it was a long time ago, or more likely than not, it was because it was a completely different team than what we have now. So with 3 teams, I made no changes, and those are the 3 that never made a move, which are LA Thieves have been the same team all year, Atlanta FaZe have been the same team all year, and Boston Breach have been the same team all year. So that first match we just talked about, my numbers that are adjusted are basically the same numbers that I would have even if I just used the full season's worth of data for those teams. So those teams are all the same. Every other team that made champs, I filtered out stuff. So for Miami, I said, let's throw out everything from early in the season when Super wasn't on the team. And maybe that's going a step too far, but I feel like just using half a season worth of data that I know is like more true to who they are is a better thing to do than to incorporate the full season, and the first half of the season has just as much weight as the second half when, like, we know, like, the Super thing is a huge change that happened for this team, and now they look super competitive. No pun intended or whatever, but yeah. So interestingly enough, when I go back to my old numbers, Surge are about a 57% favorite in this spot, and that's not surprising because when you think about these teams' season as a whole, right? Neptune came on Major 2 qualifiers. That was a long time ago. And as soon as he came in, Vancouver were a completely different team. So they had one qualifier period and one major where Vancouver Surge weren't great. They were mediocre, I would say. They weren't horrible, but like they weren't a good team in that early stage of the season. Miami Heretics, right? They had half of the season without Super, the Major 1 and Major 2. And again, like, they weren't bad. They were a fine team. I would say hovering around the, 7th, 8th, 9th best team in the league. Super comes in halfway through the season. Now, all of a sudden, it's clear that, Miami Heretics are a top 3, top 4 team in the league. So, I erased Miami Heretics first half of the season, and I erased Major 1 for Vancouver and said, what do these teams look like? Now, Miami are a tiny favorite over Surge. And it's like a clash of styles where it's Vancouver, you really can make an argument that they are the best hardpoint team in the league, or if they're not number 1, they're number 2 right behind LA Thieves. Their search and their control have been pedestrian, I would say. They're just below 50% win percentage in both. Their other numbers seem to suggest that those records are pretty accurate. Miami Heretics, really strong search team. Since Super has come onto the team, they are 75% in search and destroys. That is crazy. I expect that number to come down because we know search does not run that hot for that long. So eventually they'll start to drop searches, but that's not to say that I don't want to discount that at all. It's very impressive what they're doing. And one other thing I want to point out with champs, it hasn't been announced yet, but we can expect, I think, a grand finals that's a best of 9. The last 3 or 4 seasons have all been best of 9s. And if they are, that really helps teams that are good at search and destroy because you get 4 out of the 9 maps being searches. So if Miami Heretics are to get that far, that's maybe a boost for them, but it might be a wash if they're going up against an elite team like Thieves or FaZe. So with all that being said, I do think the market is pretty accurate here. These teams are really hard to pick out a favorite from. it's really a question of, do you rely on Surge and Hardpoint, because Hardpoint is like stickier than Search, I think, for a lot of reasons? Or do you add some weight to Heretics numbers because they've been so good lately, and Surge did struggle right there at the end at Major 4? I don't know. I think maybe you can just look at Control and be like, the likeliest outcome is these teams split Hardpoints, they split Search and Destroys. Who's got the edge in Control? I think Miami maybe do ever so slightly, but even that is close. So the bookmakers did a pretty good job. I'm curious to see if it fluctuates in the next few weeks before we get to this match. But all that being said, it's like, this is a hugely important match. I expect this will be the best one we have on opening day of Champs. But yeah, if I had to pick a winner, I'll take Heretics, just because they've been so good lately, and I think they can rely on their Search. Their Search will fall off a little, but it's still so reliable that I just like where they're at in that mode.
Yeah. Winner round 1, match 3. This is, I think we can all agree that this is going to be the final match of the day. FaZe versus...
So,
Go ahead.
I'm looking at the schedule on the COD Wiki. I don't know how they know. I don't know, maybe they don't know for sure, but they have this listed as the third game. Vancouver, Miami first, LAT Boston, then Atlanta, then Toronto, Carolina last. I don't know how they know, but they have it listed, and they don't usually list it if they don't. So I don't know. I was trying to look, but I was just gonna say, yeah, I think this might be the third game. Although, yeah, I don't know. To me, I think the third game is sometimes like feels more prime time to me, but I guess it depends on where you live. To me, I feel like that sometimes the fourth game, like, you're losing a little momentum. I suppose it's Champs, we're not going to lose our momentum, but sorry, go ahead.
That's all good. No, but yeah, we'll have to see. I don't know if it's been officially announced yet, but yeah, this feels like they're going to make this. They usually love putting Optic last to make the people stick around, so we'll see. But anyways, FaZe minus 250, Optic plus 175 on the money line. FaZe minus 1.5, minus 120, Optic plus 1.5, minus 120. FaZe minus 12.5 in the hard point, 1.5 round favorites in the Search, and 1.5 round favorites in the Control. My model is pretty ambivalent here, not really taking much of a side. My model really likes Optic and Control. And maybe a slight value on Optic plus 1.5, but not really much value on Optic money line or even really FaZe money line. But yeah, the thing is, what I will say about this one is a bit iffy for me, because Optic, as we watched Optic in the last couple of weeks, basically since the addition of Mercules, they've been a lot better than expected. And my model, in one case, especially later on in the season, can suffer a bit of lag, where they sucked all year long. Yeah, they're better right now, but they were really bad before. It's trying to balance those factors. And I think in some ways that might be a negative on my model a little bit. It might take a little longer to catch up, especially when it's only been like a few games. This has only been 5-6 matches. It will start catching up really soon, but I think it's especially in this kind of, this is like the weak spot for my model. That being said, on Champ Sunday, I was like, there's got to be a level to this Optic thing. Like, there is a ceiling, and especially when then the winner's bracket, FaZe knocked them out of the winner's bracket, and then Thieves knocked them out, right? And through that, I'm like, okay, because after they beat Ultra, I'm like, okay, there's people are like, they're really hype on this Optic team. There's a ceiling here. There's like a point where it's, okay, they're good, but they're not that good. And we hit that with the 3-1 against FaZe and then the 3-1 against Thieves when they got 3-1 both times. And I suspect this is that ceiling. Now, can Optic improve a little? They've got a month. That'd be a lot of practice. And they're going to be circling this, and they're going to be remembering how they felt when FaZe eliminated them from Winners Round 1, especially that newer team. But this is the thing, is where is the ceiling for this team? Is it a bet? Like, okay, I feel a bit better than about this team than I did a while ago, earlier in the season. This is clearly a better version of the team than that, but like, where are we from here, right? What is the ceiling on this team? And I think this line here is like approaching what I'd view as the ceiling. I don't necessarily love betting the plus 1.5, but I'd say maybe this could be like a 3-2 FaZe, and then that's it. And maybe that might be the ceiling for this team. I don't know. Maybe I'm not. Let me see if other people can agree with me on that. We'll go Ryan, then we'll go Doug. Ryan?
Yeah, this is going to sound weird to say, but I think the preferred side for me in this spot is Optic Texas. And it's been a while since I've had the guts to take Optic and with any sort of confidence. And spoiler alert, I'm not going to make Optic one of my final 3 picks at the end. But again, I think if I had to choose today, I like Optic plus 1.5 at -120. I don't think that's a bad pick at all. I've talked a lot about FaZe's hardpoint, especially down the stretch this season, and how it's been fine. Like, they're still a good hardpoint team. They're a great search team. They are a very good control team. Like, I only say very good because LA Thieves are like a legendary control team this year. But FaZe's hardpoint has gotten them into some tricky positions down the stretch at Major 3 and Major 4. And like, I think Optic with this lineup is definitely capable of competing in hardpoint. And I don't know, they'll probably be underdogs in search and in control. But to think that they could piece together 3 of these 5 maps, I don't think is crazy. I still expect FaZe to win. I think the price on these teams is pretty accurate overall. And like, trying to make my champs adjustment for Optic was really tricky. That was probably the hardest team I had to tinker with. So what I did, and tell me if this makes sense, for Texas, I said, filter out every game with Pred. Just any time Pred was in the lineup, I don't care about that for Optic. What that does, it cuts the season up into a weird pie where the first 2 weeks of the season, all the way back in December, Pred was on that team that played that opening weekend. Or it might have only been week 1. I don't even know if it was week 2. So a couple matches early in the season I'm taking out, which I don't hate. Like, that was in December anyway. And a lot of those maps that were played aren't even in the current map set. And then, like, we had the Hook thing, and Optic rebounded nicely. They flamed out at Major 1. Hook gets the bench, and all of a sudden Pred is back, and we talked about that whole thing for a while and how it was weird, and then they couldn't win a map off of any team, and it was like, oh my goodness, what's happening? Optic are like the worst team in the league all of a sudden. They rebounded a little bit with Pred, but it ultimately failed, and it was like, okay, they had Skies in the lineup at one point, and then Kenny lost it, and it was just chaos for a while. But since they've stabilized their lineup, and I mean, since Mercules has been in the lineup, like, this Optic team has looked very solid. To me, when I crunch the numbers on just like overall power score, that's how you guys all talk about ELO, and I know what that means. And I just go off of like my power scores across every game mode and then weight them based on how frequently we play each game mode. But Optic are like right there with Miami, Vancouver, and Toronto. They are 4th in that pecking order, but they're right there. So I don't think there's a lot separating all 4 of those teams. The issue with Optic is that you get a really tough opponent in winners round 1, and that sucks. And you're probably going to lose. But again, if you're going to run into one of these teams, wouldn't you like to do it early in the tournament? So I think we're in for a real treat here. This 2 versus 7 game is awesome. Like, I feel like most champs years, we don't get a match that's this competitive and has this much intrigue to it. I think Optic are definitely live. I think it would be really fun if they won. But yeah, I don't know if you put this 3rd or 4th on the schedule, because Champs is in Toronto, and I got a feeling that they might want to save Toronto for last, but we'll see. It should be fireworks nonetheless. So I don't know. Thoughts, Doug?
That's true. I didn't think about the Toronto last thing. I just did a quick scan through the last champs to see if there was like a pattern to how they did the matches, and there isn't. It looks like they do. It seems like they have a pretty free reign to do whatever they want. But yeah, that is a good shout. Maybe they will save Toronto. That would be cool for Toronto to be last. But isn't this supposed to be like? Is it supposed to be like some sort of like unbiased? No, they are hosting it, right? Like, it's hosted by Toronto.
They're not actually in Toronto. They're like an hour and a half out of Toronto.
Kitchener, right?
Yeah.
Oh. It's not hosted. Yeah, it's not like officially hosted by them or anything. Oh no, it is. Toronto Ultra Championship weekend. Yeah. Okay. So then I guess I probably would put if you're giving me even money that Toronto goes last, I'll take that. No. So yeah, I don't have a ton to say on this one. I honestly looked at the numbers and then compared them to what we had. It was a couple days ago when I did it, but yeah, I'm very much in line with like where the book is right now. I tend to agree with Robert's point that, yeah, like when you plot, so I will say, like, I've been using the term ELO. I do mostly work with this projected spreads, and then I convert them back to ELO just for like my graphs and stuff. But looking at those numbers over time, like it's been on like this strong uptrend since they added Mercules, and so I tend to be a bit skeptical that like I'm at exactly the right, I have them pegged at the exact right like value right now. Like, they're clearly in flux, and so maybe that means there's a little value on Texas. But to me, I was surprised how perfectly I was lined up with the book at the time. Yeah, it's not super interesting. I think, Ryan, the points you made about, like the vibe, going off vibes alone for this series, yeah, this is like a huge one. If Optic did take this, like, Champs is gonna be, that would be it would be incredible. Yeah, I think like we potentially see a huge Atlanta losers bracket run, and yeah, like then you propel Optic into the second round already, and they're playing. Yeah, they get their choice of Toronto and Carolina, which I think is probably the best second round matchup you could ask for in the losers or winners bracket. So yeah, I don't know, from a purely vibes perspective, I think this match probably sets the tone for the whole weekend, which I think is like cool. Yeah, but yeah, in general, I'm pretty aligned with the book that I would love to see it happen, but I'm a bit skeptical that Optic can really do much.
Yeah. Last match, apparently, it is because of the home team. Toronto versus Carolina. Toronto minus 350, Carolina plus 250. Toronto minus 1.5, minus 175. Carolina plus 1.5, plus 125. Ultra minus 59.5 in the hard point, 1.5 round. Underdogs in the search, but shaded to minus 163. And then 1.5 round favorites in the control. Yeah, my model weirdly likes Carolina here. I'm not completely sure why. Not necessarily to win. It's still got Toronto at about a 60-40-ish split to win. But it seems to like Carolina pushing this to a map 3. Probably because it seems to like Carolina a bit in the hard point, and it likes them in the search. So I think it's possible that if you combo a map 2 with the map 1 or a map 4, that's how you get this to a game 5, right? I think that's what's seeing on my model seeing that on plus 125. That's a pretty good, my model's seeing pretty good value on this. The other hand, though, Ryan's going the other way on this. He's got pretty strong value on Toronto. What's your model seeing on Toronto, Ryan?
Yeah, this one's weird because of my adjustment that I made. So, Carolina, this is probably unfair to do this, but they have 32 total maps with Rex in the lineup and Vivid out, which is not a lot at all. It's basically like qualifiers and then their one and dones at the majors where they showed up to. So yeah, it's not a lot to go off of, but the 32 maps that they've played, like, you can make a case that they've been one of the worst teams in the league. And it's so weird to me that we have this sort of thing going into Champs. And it really does bring into question, like, if they'll make a change before Champs, because it has been this bad. If you just look at Carolina with Vivid early in the season, they were a competitive team. We saw a bunch of matches, though, against Thieves and against FaZe and these elite teams in the league, and they didn't even come close. So I think that was a big thing for their lineup. It was just like, okay, we have to make some sort of change to make ourselves more competitive against these top dogs. And in the process of doing so, they've like completely cratered their team. And the interesting thing is that they have a winnable series in round 1. Like, I think getting Toronto in the 3-6 game is pretty nice, all things considered. Like, you'd honestly rather have the 6 seed, I think, and play Toronto versus the 5 seed and play Miami or Vancouver, or maybe it doesn't matter, whoever you play out of that bunch. But all things considered, it's like, it's a winnable game. It's not Thieves, it's not FaZe, but yeah, it's just so hard to trust what they've done lately. Robert, I did want to shout out a pick you made a few weeks ago, or maybe a month ago. I don't know. This was a while ago at this point. But so Ravens with Rex in the lineup, I believe, have one match win. They're like 1-9 or something like that. And their one match win was against Boston. And you called that. You made that one of your picks a few weeks ago, and I was like shocked by it. And it hit. It was a 3-0. It wasn't even close. But other than that, it's just been like disaster. Like, they can't even force a game 5 a lot of the time. So I don't know. To me, this is Toronto or nothing sort of a thing. My adjustment for Toronto was just take out Major 3 because that was with Mercules in the lineup and not Beans. Other than that, they've had the same lineup all year. And even when you take that out or leave it in, like, their numbers really don't change much. But yeah, they've just been a consistent force all season long. I think if they get tripped up, it's going to be in that, maybe the searches and the control. But that's a really narrow path to victory for Ravens if I think they could only maybe get it done in like a 2-3-5. So yeah, Toronto I feel really good about in this spot. I would prefer them -1.5. If you even wanted to go -2.5, I don't think that's crazy. But a lot of that is just based on Ravens with this lineup have not looked the best. So unless that changes, I don't know if I can change my opinion on that. But I don't know. Doug, any other thoughts on this one?
So you made me choose between my children before, my model children before, and I'm going to go the other way this time. On one thing, I definitely, my model definitely has Carolina as the stronger search team than Toronto. Still, they've held on to that, in my view, throughout the year. They were much better before, but I think they're about average, and I've got Toronto as below average in search this season. But also, you said, that it's hard. Carolina's been hard pressed to even force a game 5, but I seem to remember almost a week and a half ago they forced a game 5 against Toronto, in which they lost only 6-5 round 11, and they won the other search. And I don't know. I think I'm definitely up closer to where Robert's at for map 2s. I would have to look where that puts me on the money line specifically, but I definitely think that the spot here was I'm in alignment on the Carolina being a stronger search team than Toronto, which speaks to the how juicy the matchup will be for Optic and Atlanta. Either way, whichever team wins and whichever team loses, getting to play into this, because I do think this matchup just feels super soft to me. I don't know. Toronto has not impressed me that much in the later part of the season. I think they started pretty weak, if I remember correctly, and then they looked really good. And then then the Mercules thing happened, and they said, no, we're going back because we feel like we're strong. And I don't know. I don't know. I've not been super convinced that wasn't the right play, but that they were really in this top dog conversation with I think we see a good chance at going map 5 just because we've seen the blueprint a week ago or whatever. But I think Toronto's probably better, but I don't think it's like a huge gap.
Yeah, I think I like the +1.5, and I think that's about it here. Maybe you could argue a hard point spread or something like that, but I think that's the line for me on that. I don't love them to win it. I think Toronto still is able to win it, but I think that I could see Carolina forcing a map 5 by winning one of the 2 hard points is what I think there. Futures previews for Champs. So these are what the lines are for Champs as of right now. Thieves -138 outright, FaZe +275, and just what is this? This is nothing even remotely. It's just there's 2 teams and that's it. That's what the books are saying, is there's 2 teams, and you're starting to look at 10-1 for the next closest team. The thing is, it's like, if this was like the NFL or something like that, there'd be so much value on these teams right here, because all they have to do, but it's not, there's no value. There's literally no value, because it's every time and time again, the books have put these lines up, but they've never been punished for them. They've never been able to be punished for these lines. So but it is what it is, right? It's just there's so many ways you could, like, in other sports you could punish the books for even these lines too, but it doesn't happen. It's always the same 2 teams, and that's it. In terms of our models here, my model is pretty in line with the books, especially on Thieves. My model wasn't as high on Thieves last time, but I think it was punishing them for not doing great in the qualifiers. My model is now right with the books on Thieves. However, it's lower on FaZe and higher on Miami. And it's not bad on Optic. It's not bad on Optic Texas, though, but literally non-existent for Vancouver and Toronto. Probably a bit too heavy punishment on Toronto for that loss to Vegas Falcons. CDLMetrics, you also have a little bit of value on Miami there. This is to win, not to reach the finals. But other than that, a little bit of value on Toronto and Miami, but less so than that. And then we'll just go through one, then we'll talk about them all together here. And then again, to reach the final, I actually have a little less value than the books, but again, when we're looking at 80%, it's just whatever. It's okay. FaZe there, again, a little bit there, but again, we're pretty high on Miami at +450. But the problem is that, can they actually do it? Can they get past either Thieves or FaZe? Theoretically, they can. Theoretically, anybody can. But I just don't know if they can. They've just never been able to do it. So it's the really hard part. Can they actually pull off the win in either in the winners bracket final round or the losers bracket final round? Can they push through? And also a little bit my model likes Optic there a little bit too. We'll go with you, Doug. Kind of, what are you seeing from this data, and what do you see here?
Yeah, I think this is the case in every Champs, but especially looking at this and the way that your model likes Miami, I think it comes down a lot to the bracket dynamics that you get at Champs. Yeah, there are much more, and I've included in my diagram. That's why I have made these graphs the way that I do, is to try to view where these teams are going to fall in these certain spots if things play out the way that we expect them to. And I think Miami benefits honestly, from like from their placement in the bracket. Like they get, what is it? Let me pull it up really quick here. But yeah, they're getting, let's say they do win their first game. Like they're coming up against 100T, but they're dropping down into a matchup that's likely something like Vancouver against Boston to play them, and that is, oh, sorry, they would not be playing in that game, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, they would flip on that one. I'm literally, I said I made the graph so that I can understand it, and then I'm just like literally reading it wrong. But yeah, I do think like my read in general is that, like, to Robert's point about how we like, it's just unlikely that one of these teams other than the top two are going to win. I think there's maybe some more value on to reach the final. Like, I can see a team in this middle pack beating one of 100T in Atlanta, and maybe one of those teams is in losers bracket, and that gets them to the final. I don't really see them beating both of them in a given weekend. I think you're going to have to win it all. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think, like, Miami has a chance where, like, they could potentially only have to beat one of these teams to make the final, and, like, I think that makes it more interesting to me. But yeah, I don't know. I would have to look. But yeah, I don't know. The dynamics can be very complicated in the champs bracket, and like just, yeah, the way that it ends up shaping out. Yeah, you could legitimately get to the losers finals and never see a team like FaZe or something like that. And like that, yeah, if we get a winners finals of anything other than 100T versus Atlanta, like there are some teams that are just going to luck through on like pretty weird brackets. I will say one other note that I have is I have Boston as stronger than Carolina. Not that I think there's any value to bet either of them to make the finals or anything, but again, with like how that plays into the dynamic a little bit, like I think that like Carolina is a weaker team to drop into, and Boston might be able to make it deeper. And I still think they're terrible, but yeah, I think, I don't know, that could play a little bit into if teams have a more favored matchup between one of the two of those teams. Yeah, Ryan, sorry, go ahead. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, no, you make a lot of good points about like how the bracket could play out, and I think a lot of what the value we see here, like Robert and I are aligned in a lot of ways on these teams, especially Miami. And it's not that like we think Miami are super competitive with Thieves or FaZe. Like we think they could win those series. We saw Miami win a series against Thieves at Major 4. It sucks that they ran into him again, and you're probably not going to beat him twice. Or, right, if you're Miami, would you almost have rather lost that series, ran through the loser bracket, and then play him in an elimination match where maybe you can make it through? Brackets play out in a lot of weird ways, so the hope is that we do all these simulations and then we can see the truth of, okay, even if Miami loses, are there enough paths for them to make it through? And we think that there are. A couple other notes. I mentioned the best of 9 thing. We expect that to get announced. I might already be missing it if it's on the CDL website, but if it is a best of 9, that is very good for teams that are reliant on search and destroy. In this set of champs, right, that is Miami to a large extent. FaZe are an elite search team, and like Thieves are still very good at search and destroy as well. So the longer series help the good teams, but if you're not a good team, being good at search alone can help you along the way. And then one other thing to note is that winners round 1 almost means less at champs than it does at a major, because if you lose, you're in losers round 2, not losers round 1. Like, you don't have to go through a Vegas Falcons and maybe lose, or a LA Gorilla Mates and maybe lose that game. Like, you're already past that point. So in some ways, it's like winners round 1 doesn't matter, but it obviously does. It's just a weird dynamic that, like, we get to champs and it actually, you have to win one less game if you go down to the losers bracket, and in some ways it makes it a little flukier in that sense, but the best of 9 can maybe make up for that at the end. So all that being said, like, Miami, Vancouver, Optic, and Toronto, all those 4 teams in the middle, they're all priced in a very flat way, and I think that's in general the correct way to price it. I think Toronto should be the highest odds, the most expensive team of that bunch, because they have such a soft first match against Carolina. And I'm with you, Doug. I have Carolina as the worst team at this tournament. And yeah, if Toronto get that team in round 1, good for them. That's a nice little boost for your odds. That being said, like, Optic, I think, are overpriced a little. Like, you have a really tough game in round 1, and that is just, it forces you to maybe have to win 5 in a row for that to happen. So I think it makes for an interesting champs because there's this cluster of 4 teams that we view as they're pretty good, and it wouldn't be a shock to see one of them win, but picking out which team that's going to be is pretty challenging. So Robert and I are pointed in the Miami direction, but I think you can make a good case for Toronto because of that soft opening round match and the fact that they don't see Thieves, who I have as the clearly best team in the league, until winners final, or maybe they see them in the losers bracket early. So yeah, I think Toronto makes some sense. You can make a case for Vancouver just with maybe Major 4 isn't indicative of what this team is. They're still a really good hardpoint team. They can use that to their advantage. But yeah, they have a coin flip right away against Miami. So it's going to be fascinating. But yeah, I just think the Thieves prices and the FaZe prices have just gotten so out of hand because they've been to all of the tournament finals throughout the year. Like, it's been a 2-team league for most of the season. So it makes sense that their prices would just be astronomical at this point.
Yeah. I think, can anyone break this monopoly here? And I don't know. I honestly don't know. So we'll have to see. But anyways, moving on. So this is what your percentages of who got where from your modeling, correct? Oh, from Doug.
Yes.
From Doug. Yeah. Okay.
I think this is just prettier more than anything. It's like a good way to visualize how the teams, how often. So it's basically like, other than the first round where you have the actual matchups, like, it's how often a team will win in that specific spot, how often that will happen. And I think it can help, with some of these. It's like the thing that sort of draws my attention here is, I think a pretty common path would be like Toronto wins and then loses to Atlanta in the second round, and that causes them to drop down. And the 3 teams that are coming into that game, you've got Boston fairly likely, and then either Miami or Vancouver more likely coming in. And that's, again, like, they're not easy teams. And obviously I think Miami's stronger than Toronto. Or, so, yeah. Do I think that? I don't know. I think so, yeah.
55-45, yeah.
Against Toronto, I wonder if I don't remember if I have Miami stronger than. But yeah, either way, I think that's probably the softer of the elimination round 2s that you can get, and stuff like that I think is just like interesting to look at. Like, even when I'd run this originally versus when I updated it, like, I had liked FaZe a lot, or sorry, 100T a lot more the first time through. But yeah, I think it's more interesting just to watch the ribbons. And also, I spent like 20 hours trying to make this thing work last season, so now I'm never getting rid of these ribbon plots. Like, they're so hard to make, and yeah, I've fully invested in the ribbon plot lifestyle now, and I think they're cool to look at how the brackets play out.
This is R, right?
Yep. Yeah, this is all in R.
You can tell by the font.
This is Roboto Mono, I think. Oh, but the fonts on the labels probably isn't. That's probably what the giveaway. Yeah. Yep. Damn. Actually, probably just the labels in general are so R, they scream R. Those.
Yeah, but it's really good though. It's nothing taken away from it. It's really cool. Yeah, it's a really cool visualization. Yeah, I mean, I agree with this, but the thing is, now if you can visualize this, there might be a path for Miami. Like, if a Miami can edge out of Vancouver here, then they go down here, they wouldn't have to worry about, because assuming a Thieves come, because according to your path here, and as we all have said, Thieves are on a collision course here through the winners bracket, right? So they knock off Boston, they get Miami here, then they get probably FaZe or Texas or whatever. It basically, if Miami comes down here, they wouldn't have to worry about FaZe until here, potentially. Or if, like, Optic were to knock, but even if Optic were to knock out FaZe, here, like, they're not really having to worry about FaZe until here or here, so they can get another win or two. So
you can totally see how Miami. Yeah, like, I think it's clear here how Miami, to reach the finals, they probably only need to beat one of 100T or Atlanta. Like, they might only need to beat one of them to do it, which would be huge for them. And I think, like, more doable. Like, it's probably not likely, but it is. Yeah, I think that path that you outlined there, where it's like Miami wins, loses, and then plays FaZe in the 4th round, like, that is probably the path they have to grand finals that actually has, like, at least some probability associated with it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you get Optic versus Toronto, and then whoever wins that, you get that. So there might be a path for someone other than FaZe and Thieves. So, any comments for this?
It's beautiful. And I was just scanning your percentages that are listed here, and I don't think anything is, like, way off by any stretch. Like, you're high on Thieves relative to like where Robert and I are, but I've got them like 49% to win. You've got them 55%. That's ballpark. It's a coin flip if Thieves win this thing. And yeah, I totally agree with that. And then, yeah, it's FaZe are next up, but even that is going to take a stretch. And then it's a lot of tight ribbons after that with Miami and Vancouver and Toronto and all those teams. So I think you're
bottom ones.
Yeah.
T-colored. Yeah. It's not how it looked last year. They're all like most that were strong and a few that were weak. And yeah, you look at
Yeah. So I think it just goes to show that like this Champs could be a fun one if Thieves do their thing and they're there in the finals. That's a great story because it's like who can take down this juggernaut of a team. Like I know Thieves like they won as much as FaZe did this year, but to me they are like on another level of good right now. And it just makes for an interesting storyline. If it's FaZe versus Thieves, it's okay. This is round 3. Who wins this? FaZe got it once. Thieves got it once. They won another couple of majors each. It's round 3 is a fun storyline. Can Vancouver break through if it's them? Can Miami make it through to the final? And maybe like that whole thing that happened at Major 4 was crazy. So yeah, can Toronto go on a run that we really haven't seen since Hercules was on the team? And you can even make a case for Optic with Hercules in the lineup and their whole bounce back. It's just fascinating. Lots of good storylines. I think Boston and Carolina, sorry, but thanks for showing up. Other than that, it's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Models versus markets. Here are our picks for Champs weekend. So I'll go through with mine, then we'll go down the line. I've got Miami versus Vancouver. I like Heretics here. I even have played a little bit on the -1.5 there for that. But my pick, I'll take the money line. For my second pick, I'm gonna go with Vancouver. I'm gonna go Vancouver plus. Sorry, not Vancouver. Carolina plus 1.5 versus Toronto. I think they can force the game 5, and if they force the game 5, I think that might be the best option for them. And then I'm gonna take FaZe over Optic in the hard point. I'm not the biggest fan of this, but I think it's not a bad play. So I think I'm gonna take them because I think Optic can make a comeback in maybe the search and maybe the control, but I think FaZe is probably a bit stronger in the hard point. So that's why I'm gonna take FaZe there. CDLMetrics, what do you have?
Yeah, so I did this thing at Major 4, and it worked. It wasn't awesome, but it worked. But you can make an argument that these are dumb picks nonetheless. I have all to reach the final pick. So Miami plus 450, Vancouver plus 450. Those teams play each other in round 1, so I'm losing probably one of those immediately. But I just think both of these teams have enough firepower to beat Thieves. It's going to take a lot, but Vancouver have the hard point that I think can compete. Can they win a search or 2 in that series versus Thieves? Miami have the search to compete. Can they match up in hardpoint or control? Like, control is going to be hard for either of these teams, but I think they have a game mode that they can go to and just be like, this is how we beat this superstar team in round 2. And whoever loses that, like, I still feel really good about them going on a loser's bracket run. Again, like I said, winners round 1 means less here, if anything, so you drop down to losers round 2, basically, if you lose that opening match anyway. And then I've got Toronto, a team that I have in the same ballpark as Miami and Vancouver. Their odds are plus 300, I think mostly due to the fact that they're playing Ravens in round 1, but I think that's like a justifiable price adjustment considering that, yeah, they get Ravens in round 1, and then they'll probably get FaZe in round 2, who are a much more beatable team, in my opinion, than Thieves. If one of those teams can make the final, I'll be happy. If 2 of them make it, I'll be ecstatic, albeit that's very unlikely to happen. But let's go to Doug, because Doug's got a really fun one for his.
I wanted to cook up something special for you guys for the Champs episode. Yeah, I guess first, I will say I had 100T to win Champs is like a pretty good line when I first looked at this, when you first reached out to me. And since then, I think I'm more settled in that I think 138 is probably fair, but I still think I think it's a pretty good shout. It's hard to bet against an absolute generational super team of juggernauts or whatever. So I'll take that. And then, I think I agreed, or I think I mentioned it before, but I think I think Miami's stronger than 17.5-point favorites in hardpoint against Vancouver. But yeah, that's a pretty low quality pick. But my gold pick, I have 2 search and destroy maps that I think will be played a lot more. I think when I saw these, that Bet365 was offering these, I was just like, oh, I should just look and see. Because hey, I wonder how much they're thinking about the dynamics of how often teams are playing in this versus in our normal major, like, tournaments, and then also just like in general across the 4 bottom teams aren't playing at all in this tournament, and so like those teams tend to have weirder map pools than like the top teams do, and so I think both of these are very interesting. So Dealership is the favorite to be the most played S&D map, and I do think that's probably pretty fair, but plus 400 on red card and plus 750 on rewind. So I've got both of them likely to be more than 20% of the map pool, and so I think it's very possible that they could be played more often. And so I think I had jotted down a couple notes here about it. So yeah, in Major 4 and the Major 4 qualifiers, 23 and 21% of all the searches were red card and rewind respectively. So like almost a quarter of all of them were those 2 maps, and only followed by Dealership having more. But then also that the red card is LAT's most picked search and destroy map as well. And so if we think that LAT is going to go far, and I mean, imagine if it's game 9 too, we get actually, I guess it probably doesn't matter because you're playing like basically all the searches at that point. But yeah, like I think it's interesting. I don't think plus 400 or plus 750 seems fair at all. So what I did to get to the numbers, like those are just some facts about it, but to get to like where I thought these maps would be played, yeah, I basically weighted how often every team plays their propensity to play each map, weighted by how many matches I think each team will play. So actually using the same simulation that I used to build that thing of who wins in each round, I could look at how often teams play in every round, and then yeah, like basically multiply by the number of matches that they're going to play by like their weighted propensity to play those maps to see how often each map would be played. And I don't quite see the same distribution that Bet365 has on those maps. Ironically, in Hardpoint, it's like almost exactly lined up with what they have, but in Search, it's like way off. So I don't know. I do think there's like legitimate value for those to be played. I still think it's less likely than not, but I think that I see a world where Dealership doesn't get played that much, and especially with teams like 100T go deep who don't play Dealership as often as they pick red card and rewind. I think it's live at least.
I love it.
Yes, thoughts. Am I just a madman for bet? I had never seen those before. I don't usually get into those like weird special tournament bets or whatever. When I saw these, I was like, there's no way they can be right about all of these, right? There's no way they just know. And yeah, like I had to check, and this Search was the one that came up the most, but Control's a little weird. Just there's like fewer of them, and like people are much like more honed in on specific maps. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's cool.
I think, yeah, they do have those markets usually for most of the tournaments, but yeah, as you clued in, they're a bit softer. There's been a lot of times when their projection has been dead wrong, and there's been a lot of times it's been closer than not, but again, there's a lot of value sometimes in their picks. I find that sometimes they'll say, oh, this is the one that's going to be played most, and then it's just never played for some reason, because they usually don't adjust it very much. I think they basically just take the most average played map and they just chuck it up there and say, whatever, here you go. I don't think they adjust for... They definitely don't adjust for patches. They're not like, oh, this map got worse on this patch, so we're not going to do that, or this map got better. They don't make any adjustments at all.
Yeah, so I was seeing here at Major 4 and Major 4 qualifiers, Dealership was played 19 times and Red Card was played 14 times. So it's... I don't know. To me, I don't know. Rewind was played 13 times, so only one less time than Red Card was, and it's, quite a bit steeper odds on rewind than red card. So I don't know. It is weird. Yeah, I do wonder how they. Yeah, I think you're probably right. They probably just line them up and say, yeah, it's probably going to go this way. But I don't know. I didn't dig too deep into what teams are the ones driving the Dealership picks, because picks versus play is like that's what I was trying to get at. It was like what teams are picking these maps versus just ending up on these maps, because a lot of the best teams they're happy to let the other team pick a map that they don't really like. They're not super strong on, because they can beat them anywhere, where like maybe it doesn't go the same way, vice versa.
Yep. Okay. And combined model plays, not a ton here, but we like Boston map 1. I think this is very slightly like Boston map 1. I think maybe we like Boston on the spread map 1, maybe the plus 59.5. I don't think we're going to be betting Boston outright map 1. Thieves map 2, and then Miami map 2 in the search, and then in phase map 2 against Optic. And then we actually both like Miami to win outright and reach the final. So maybe we'll see what Miami can do for champs there. Other than that is it for us for champs. We will be back for the Esports World Cup later this summer. I'm not sure exactly because that's like in July, right? That's like late July, I think, right?
I think it's July. I just looked up today. It's like July 24th to the 27th, something like that. So I'm guessing we'll have lines in a couple weeks, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah, I think so. So, well, after this, right? Like, it's going to be wait until I have this, and then we'll have lines for that, yeah. But, yeah, other than that, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, of course, Doug. Always nice to have you on, as always. And, yeah, we will enjoy champs, and we'll see you for the Esports World Cup. See you, everybody. We'll see you for the Esports World Cup. See you, everybody.